Jimmy, how you doing today?
Jeremy, I am great. How are you?
Doing really well. It's been a couple weeks since we've done two fiduciaries,
We're back.
but we are back in the saddle again. Today we're going to tackle money psychology. This is always a fun topic. You can go anywhere with it. We're going to use a couple examples here.
Can't wait.
So this was inspired by an actual incident or observation that I had, and it made me have a conversation with my wife about transactions at the checkout counter and how much there is in terms of money psychology there, how much you can learn, both good and bad,
Right.
at the checkout counter. And so I wanted to ask you, what do you remember from either as a kid or in current day from the checkout counter?
It's funny that the story that inspired this today. I do remember as a kid. I remember my mom was writing checks at the grocery store, and I had a lack of an appreciation for money, as I think most 5, 6, 7-year-olds do. But whenever we would be out at a restaurant, or I always wanted to play video games. And whenever she'd tell me, no, sorry, it costs money, I just said, well, write more checks.
Right?
That's all it
Makes
takes
sense.
is to write more checks. So I remember vividly my mom taking the checkbook out and writing checks at the grocery store to cover the bill for groceries, and just not appreciating how much money that actually cost.
So my wife was telling me a story about what her mom would tell her when they were at a checkout counter, and a lot of times they had a full family, 5 people in the family, and they're buying a lot of different stuff. And she says, "Look, the money goes pretty fast, doesn't it, Stacy?"
Right.
And so that's absolutely true. Maybe more today with some of the food inflation than we've ever seen. Also, another rule. This was a rule in my household as well. Was there was no buying any of the candies or the gum or any of that. And I
Right.
remember I grabbed one of those little packets of chiclet one time, opened it up. My mom was not too happy with me. So, there's a lot of temptation. There's a lot of opportunities for parents to teach things and for people to learn. And then these things tend to permeate our life for a very long time.
Right. Absolutely.
So here was an actual observation that we had the other day in our hometown. And it was really interesting because this young boy, probably about 12 years old, had a bag of chips, and he was buying that, and he had $4 bills. And boy, I was actually, when I was looking at it, I was like, oh, this is kind of like a throwback thing, man. This kid's got $4, he's getting a bag of chips, kind of neat, kind of
Maybe
cool.
he earned it from doing some chores around the house, or whatever the case may have been. But he earned some money, possibly.
I had all these like positive thoughts,
Yeah.
and then it went downhill from there. So the transaction was $3.70. He gives him the $4, and he's owed 30 cents. And the kid says, "Just keep it." And the guy says, "Are you sure? Here you go." He's like, "Nope, just keep it."
He didn't want to carry the change.
And whatever the motivation was,
Yeah.
without getting too particular or judgmental, it was sort of clear to me that he didn't really understand the value of the money at that point, right? And these coins are still dollars, and they add up to dollars and cents.
Right.
Dollars, right?
Right.
The pennies add up. And so if you look at it just in terms of what he did from a transactional perspective, he gave away 8% of that transaction.
Right.
And I thought, gosh, it's weird, That's not a
interesting,
tipping
right?
environment,
Right.
This is not an episode that we're talking about tipping.
Right.
So
The cashier doesn't get to keep the money.
he did not. In fact, he kept it in the till.
Right.
Right. So it's one of those things. All right. So I thought about this. What does this mean if you were to extrapolate this 8% transaction piece to this same boy? Let's fast forward. Let's imagine for a moment that he's a 22-year-old young man. And let's imagine that he's got a salary of $50,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And he decides to save 8% of that salary.
Yep.
So that's $4,000, right?
Yep.
And he's got, in this scenario, let's fast forward. Let's say he does this for 40 years, albeit this gentleman never earns more than $50,000 in this scenario.
It's a tough employer not giving any inflationary raises.
That's a tough setup. So, but he still saves the 8%.
Right.
Saves the 8%. That's $4K a year. Puts that to work for himself in an investing situation, let's say his annual rate of return is 7%.
Seems like a fair return to assume for an average rate over that period of time.
It does. I mean, it is a fair number. So, I mean, I know you already know the answer, but at the end of the day, the numbers are always shocking when you talk about exponential growth.
Always shocking, and I can't wait to see what that's going to be. I know it's going to be a big number, but
so here we go. Without further ado,
wow,
the total dollar amount there is $798,000. So it's just under $800,000. I mean, it's a lot of money.
From $4,000 a year,
right? And you talk about what does it take to retire? Well, how much money do you need? That's such a big question that we kind of grapple with all the time.
Right.
But I guess what we're trying to really intimate here today is that psychology and your money are two things that are intertwined, and having a healthy psychology when it comes to money is really important.
Well, I think, look, so much of the psychology is likely driven from interactions that he has witnessed from his parents. And, not likely tipping much at the parents are likely paying with a credit card at the grocery store, but nonetheless, you tend to learn a lot from your parents or role models that you have growing up. We know this. We've studied it. We've seen it. The money scripts and how we attach certain emotions and feelings towards money as we learn different lessons. But this is one that if you could have stepped aside and said, "Hey, listen, here's something to think about." This is a pretty powerful example of exponential growth and the importance of saving, and and every penny counts.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't have to. I know it seems small, and any of these one transactions, 30 cents isn't going to make or break this boy's financial independence down the road. But if you had compounded that type of mentality, maybe it does cost him in a bad way.
There's so many things that you can talk about here. We won't bore you with all the details, but one of the things that made Warren Buffett so successful was that this guy, it wasn't necessarily that he was the best investor to ever walk the face of the earth, although many people think that.
Sure.
And that's fair.
Yeah.
Because the results matter.
Right.
But the actual reality of it was that he started investing when he was 10 years old.
Yeah.
He never really retired.
Yeah.
He didn't become an uber rich man until he was over 50 years old.
Right.
And so, I mean, it is about having a positive image of money and enacting behaviors
for sure
that are important. You talk about this a lot. One of the things that you can do as a young person, the best thing you can do is continue to save.
Your savings rate is more important than the return rate when you're young.
Absolutely. So if nothing else, we want to impress upon you all today that, there's a lot to think about in terms of your behavior with money. So please do that. Don't just take things for granted. Think about it, be cognizant of it, and be teachers.
Right. Love it.
That's all we have for today. Hope everybody's doing well. Thank you.